Da-da-da-dum, da-da-da-dum. Joel Felsenstein for Rockstar X. Thank you, my friend, my buddy. I love what you're doing in the autistic and neurodiverse community. Thank you for creating that wonderful intro and outro message, that video. It's fantastic. I love it. Rockstar X is not only a partner with us, but they also are a sponsor. So thank you so much for being a sponsor with us. The next sponsor is Hounds of Business Community. If you haven't joined, if you don't know Mike Ashabrainer and Isabel Fortin and Christine Bell and all the others in there, so many different people from all over the world. Fantastic group. Thank you for sponsoring us. Thank you for being part of the show. Thank you for all the work you do behind the scenes to help nonprofits like ours. And we appreciate you guys. Lazarus Learning. When I talk to you about Michelle Arntz, she is one of what I call the OG8. In June of 2022, when we had our very first website that I built myself, and we were just getting started, she and 7 others were the original 8 partners we have. Now we have almost 90 partners in 6 countries. I can't tell you how thrilled I am over this time period to have these people stand with us. Michelle Arntz is with Lazarus Learning. She diagnoses the problems. She gives you the medicine you need and gets you on your way. And finally, Circle of Friends Club, my buddy Jason Wilson, not only a fantastic partner, but thank you for sponsoring us. Thank you for what you do with the Freedom Fight Expo. It's incredible, all the work that you're doing behind the scenes, man. All the way from Colombia, we are going to visit. My wife wants to visit. We're going to say, hey, we're going to have a good time. And you're going to teach me more Spanish because I need that. I need it. So without any further ado, ladies and gentlemen, I want you to give it up for Laurel Wiers. She is the owner of Lighthouse Counseling. She's the founder of Optimal Outcome Coaching and Consulting. She is a collaborator. She's been on different magazines. She's been in different major publications, but she's also a collaborator with Critical Memory Integrity and Integration. I could read. I almost could read. I should have just memorized it, then it would have been better. And my favorite, you'll notice in the beginning and the end of the show, we're going to have her banner up with that QR code. Scan that. That'll take you right to her book. She is the author of Betrayed, Not Broken. And right above her head, or actually her left shoulder, you will see, you can scan that QR code and go right to her book. So without further ado, thank you so much for being on the show, Laurel. It's great to have you here. I cannot wait to dive into this. And the comments are already going nuts. I just see the ticker just keeps going up and up and up and up. So I will get to that in 1 second, but great to have you here on the show.
Oh, thank you so much, Jason. I'm so excited to be here. And I just know already, I can tell by the intro, this is going to be so fun.
Good. I am glad. Hey, Lewis. Hey, Jody. Hey, Tim Duffy. Hey, Oli in the house. I see the hounds. Thank you for being here. And you know what? The very first thing is I gave you an intro, but I would love for you to tell the audience and the people that may see this later on, tell us more about who you are, and then we're going to dive into kind of what you do and how you do it.
All right. So I am a licensed marriage and family therapist. I've been doing therapy for about 24 years. And the interesting piece about what I do is that while I am a trauma expert at this point in my life, it's actually not anything I ever wanted to do, Jason. I was actually scared of it. So for the first 17 years or so of my career, if you came in with the diagnosis of PTSD, I did not know what to do with you. And so I would do what they taught me in graduate school, which was cognitive behavioral therapy. And I would talk to you about things, but I found out that you didn't really get better. I did not see transformation. I did not see the change the way that I was used to seeing with my regular clients. So I'm definitely one of those therapists that I want you better, like yesterday. And I don't want you coming back to me week after week, month after month, just paying
Yeah.
and not getting better. I mean, who wants that? So I decided, okay, I can't help this population. So I'm going to refer out. So that's what I did. I would refer everybody out to other clinicians that I hoped, crossed my fingers, were getting help, but I don't know if they actually did. But then all
Oh,
that changed 8 years ago.
and what changed? What happened?
So 8 years ago, I ended up in bed with an injury. And while I was in bed rehabbing myself, I was watching a television program, and there were veterans on the program, and they were talking about how they were getting better. And as they were talking, I thought, oh my gosh, whatever they're doing, like, this is really creating change. Their lives are changing. They are not triggered anymore. So I started to research the form of therapy that they were talking about. They kept mentioning ART, art. And I thought, this clearly isn't like drawing art
Right.
therapy. So it was called accelerated resolution therapy. And within a month, I was signed up for a training because I thought I've got to figure out what this is. I was trained by the developer of the therapy, actually.
Oh,
And
cool.
within 3 days, I was using it with my clients. I had a list of 4 clients. They were waiting for me when I came back. I had said to them, look, I don't know if I can help you, but I'm doing this training and I need some people to try it out on. Would you be game for that? And
Cool.
they were. And I did my first client, and it was amazing, Chasen. So she had come to see me because there had been a tragic accident with her toddler. And ever
Okay.
since that, she could never look over anything. So it had happened in a raised ranch. So anything that mimicked looking over a wall would trigger her. So she couldn't go on like the second floor of a mall or go on the second floor of a
Wow.
house and look down. It was very debilitating. So when she came in, I did this new protocol that I'd been set up with, and I crossed my fingers and held my breath when she left that it had done what it needed to. And about 3 hours later, she called me from the mall and she said, Laurel, I am standing here on the second
Wow.
mall and I'm looking over the edge and nothing is going on. I feel completely calm, completely neutral. So yeah,
That
it
is
made me a
so
believer.
awesome. And
Yeah.
well, tell me again what you said art. It's ART.
Yep. Yep. So one of the forms of therapy, what I did back then was called accelerated resolution therapy. And that's what I did. So it's basically it was an outgrowth of EMDR, which a lot of people are familiar with that for trauma. And this is like EMDR on steroids, is what I say. It's a little bit quicker. It has a very direct protocol. I know what I'm doing every step of the way, what I'm looking for you to be doing. And yeah, I started to use that, and it changed everything. My clients were getting better within one session, Chase. And that is the cool thing. Literally one session, that girl went out and was fine. And so for a lot of the trauma I treat, if it's acute trauma, it's one session. And for other people, it might be 3 to 4 or 5. But that's what's so beautiful about it. It's so expedient in the way that it works. So since then, I became a trauma like geek. I just wanted to see anyone who had
Yeah.
trauma. I wanted to know about it. It's what I see everywhere. And it is my favorite thing to work with. I just love seeing people get freedom and be released from what's the shackles of trauma and what it does to you.
That's incredible. I mean, I remember, before the show started, I mentioned to you that, as I was just kind of looking through some of your posts and stuff, I remember you telling the story. You were relaying a story of one of your clients that had found the person who had committed suicide, and she could not go in to do laundry anymore because she found the guy in the laundry room, and that image was stuck in
Yes.
her head. So
Mhm.
naturally, when I'm reading this story and you're telling the story you just told, I'm sitting here going, how does that work? Like I don't understand it, but how great is that? That okay, you're telling me that we could take trauma and triggers that are stuck in our heads and we can release that and be done with it. I'm like, where do I sign up? Like why why is it taking 60 years for me to figure this out? Like, so this is incredible, absolutely incredible.
Yeah.
Obviously I want to know more, and then I want to dive in, to your services and stuff like that here a little bit later. But and I'll put up your website as well. But people, I also want to talk about your book too. So if you're just joining us and you didn't see from the very beginning, right above Lauren's left shoulder, you'll see a tiny barcode. It works, people. I tried it. Okay. I tried it from my Android, and most of you have Apple. So I'm one of the few Android guys still left in the world. But that will take you straight to her book. And trust me, you're going to want to pick this up. But Laurel, jump in now, because now, I mean, I know the audience is intrigued. I'm intrigued. Talk more about how this process works and what you do. I don't want you to give up trade secrets, obviously. I want people to work with you, but tell us, how this works, because I'm like blown away. I don't understand how it works, but what freedom that would be to erase or change. It doesn't erase, but it changes what you are focused on remembering, right?
Yes, absolutely. So it's kind of scientific, but I will make it as general as possible. So, what happens is when we go through an event that's traumatic, it's almost too big for the brain to process in a sense. So, when we go throughout the day, normal things that happen, we go to sleep at night, we have REM sleep, and it really makes sense of all the events of our day. But when we have something that's very charged emotionally, or we almost die, anything like that, it's too big in a sense for our brain to make sense of. So it kind of sits out in the front of our brain and everything starts to come through it. It becomes the new filter throughout what we see the world. So in a way, your brain is saying, ooh, we had this really big thing happen way back when, and we never want to feel that way again. So it stays right up front and it's always scanning, right, to make sure that we never feel that way again. But the thing is, we can actually take these memories and we can process them manually. So I relate it sometimes to a car. So when we drive our car and it's an automatic car, right, it does everything just as it should. We don't have to think about it. We don't have to do anything. The transmission adjusts, does what it needs to. Well, that's our everyday activity. But when we have a trauma, it's like a manual. It's like those beautiful standards I used to have when I was 16 years old. And you manually have to do everything to get your brain to finally run smoothly. So the way that we hold trauma is that we have two different sides of our brain. So we hold the narrative, which are the facts in the story, on one side of our brain. And on the other side of our brain, we have the images and the sensations. Now, these are the problems. It's never to say, I was raped or I was in a car accident. That's not what trips us up. What trips us up are the images and the sensations. So, what we can do is we can process those images and those sensations and file them away in your brain so that they're no longer charged. So that's what I do when people come in. We calm down the way that the body holds it. So when people come to me, they'll tell me, oh, I'm triggered every time I have to get in my car since I had a car accident. So I'll say to them, where do you feel that in your body? And then they'll kind of say like, oh, I feel like my heart start to race. Then I'll say, okay, let's follow that. Close your eyes. Where is it taking you? And they'll say, oh my gosh, I remember in that accident when everything from the backseat of my car flew up front and hit the windshield. That's where I feel it. So I say, okay, let's process that. So then I bring them through this whole protocol where we take the charge out of that memory. The thing is, our brains, they can do this work on their own. You see, every time we remember something, Chasen, we actually have new proteins that are synthesized. So the memory that you recall is actually going to be different than the one that you put back in your brain just by recalling it. So what that means is that it's unstable. So while it's unstable, while I have you remembering this memory, I'm helping you be calm, I'm calming you down. And then when we have this window open, it's called the window of reconsolidation. While this memory is open and kind of fragile and unstable, I then change the associations you have with it. So we say, what do you wish might have been different about that day? And I bring people through a whole thing. But then what happens is when we calm the body down and we recreate that memory, then that window closes. And when the person is done with the session, they can tell me every single fact about the accident, but what they see in their mind's eye is the new memory that we created to go with it, the new association. So it's not a false memory. I'm just changing the images and the sensations you feel when you talk about that original memory. And it all happens
Oh,
fairly quickly.
wow. That is, I'm just sitting here trying to process all of this. And at the same time, I'm going, well, holy cow. Yeah, I mean, I tell people a lot of times that there's just stuff that I feel like that I've just blocked. Like, because I can't remember a lot of things from my childhood. But I had a very abusive childhood. There was a lot of trauma involved in those earlier days
Mhm.
from my mom. And so I just don't remember a lot of it.
Yeah.
But I'm sure, knowing what I know about my past and where I am and where I've come, all of these years, I know that I have triggers because of events that happened that I may still not really focus on a thing. I'm not really associating it with an image, but in my heart, in my mind, I know that this is stemming from something that happened to me when I was 3, 4, 6, so this is super powerful. Hey, Brian, great to have you join us. Hey, Noni, thank you for being in the house. Lewis, if I missed you before, I'm so sorry. Tim Duffy, Jody, thank you so much. Great to see Hounds in the house. And Brian, I've missed you, buddy. I'm so glad you're back on the platform. Great to see you. Love this conversation. I mean, this is so interesting and it's so incredible the work that you're doing. This really is, this is game changing for a lot of people.
Oh, oh
Talk,
yeah,
I
absolutely.
want to talk about, before we talk about services, because we're good on time. I want to talk about, are there any limits to what this can do? So someone who's like PTSD from combat, or if there's multiple images and multiple things going on, will this just take longer, or will this be something that, okay, there's a boundary, I can heal to some degree, and then they're going to have to do some other steps?
Oh, such a great question. So this is the super cool thing about trauma is that when you have an original trauma, it doesn't matter if it went on for 3 days, 3 years, 30 years. Once you have the initial problem, a lot of the things that happened after that are actually re-traumatizations of the same thing. So let me give you an example. I can see somebody who's been sexually abused for 10 years, and it doesn't mean that we need that many more sessions than somebody who was raped, because the first abuse is actually they're re-traumatized with that same abuse every time through those 10 years. So what I say to them is, I want you to pick your first or worst or top 3 memories that you have that represent that abuse, that represent the trigger in your body, what it feels, right? Where does it bring us back to in time? And then the movie that we create, we have them watch those images, or we'll watch those 3. And that's all that we have to watch. Now, if it's gone on for a really long time, we might need 2 or 3 sessions, but it doesn't mean that we have that either. I've done people who've been abused for 12, 15 years in one session, literally,
Wow.
Jason, one session, and it pulls the trigger. Because the way that trauma is, it's so interesting. It's like a house of cards. Like once you pull one thing, the rest of it goes with it. So I'll check back in after to see, and for good measure, I'll be like, okay, let's see if anything's left. Because sometimes when you do one session, your body can only hold so much pain at a certain point in time. So when we've cleared that first level, sometimes at my follow-up, and that's why I have it, other stuff will have bubbled up since then because they could not see it because their brain was so busy holding all these other memories and images or these things that were going on for them. But if it's combat, it's the same thing. You can say, pick the most horrific moments. And I check with them to make sure their body holds them the same. And as long as they do, then that's one session. But if somebody has, let's say, like CPTSD, which is called complex trauma,
Yeah.
complex PTSD.
I
So let's
just
say,
found out about this. I'm
yeah,
sorry, I didn't mean to. I literally
no.
had no idea what this was. And I just saw Sarah O'Brien posting about this recently, and yeah, fantastic. Go
Yeah.
ahead.
And
I'm
so
sorry.
oh, no, that's fine. And so with that, you have somebody, right, who's had multiple traumas throughout their life that's gone on. So when somebody comes in to see me with that, those are my longer people. So what's interesting is if you have the same abuse for 30 years, it could be one session. But if you have 4 different traumas over those 30 years, to me, that's going to be 4 sessions. So your car accident is a session, your rape is a session, your domestic violence is a session, or anything else that's gone on. And you test that by the way your body holds it. So when you think about it, when somebody's talking to me about, say, abuse by a parent, and I'll say, where do you feel it? They'll say, oh, my stomach. But then if I say, now talk to me about when you were shamed at work in your 30s, and that was a traumatic experience for them, where do you feel that? That will feel different sometimes. They'll be like, ooh, yeah, that doesn't feel like when I think about my dad. So it's interesting how your body holds different traumas in different ways. So then I'll start to categorize them that way. And that's how I know where I need to go and how many sessions I'll need. But typically, each trauma that is felt differently, I will process in a different session.
Wow. I'm curious. Is it? I mean, obviously, people have to really, and you're working with people have to really be open and vulnerable, and they've got to tell the truth, and they've got to share where things are falling for them and the things that they feel. Do you ever find with people that sometimes the hardest thing is to get them to that level, to get them to a place where they just can open up because they're, like you said, either they've got multiple things going on, they feel like they're dealing with so much pain. Is it ever become something where, there's almost like breaking the ice, getting through the steps to get to the place of healing?
So, you know what is so interesting about that question is usually people don't come to therapy because they don't want to be vulnerable and they don't want to talk about what's happened, right? Because there's shame, embarrassment, all those things. The beautiful thing about this treatment is I don't need to know what you went through, Jason. So if someone comes to
Okay.
me and they say, I was abused for 10 years, I don't need to know anything about it. All I have to say to them is check with your body. Do you see an image? What are the first and worst? And that's all they need to have. And I can work with them with just that. So it makes it so I work with a ton of first responders, and first responders are my hardest crew. I love them so much, but they are so stinking hard because coming to somebody to say that you need help when they are the helper is a very difficult thing. And there's just not, it's starting to change, but the environment around that is that you can't have something wrong with you, right? And
Yeah,
so
it's a
nobody
stigma.
talks about it either. Totally. So
Yeah.
when I have those guys come in who are like, nope, I don't like therapy, I say, cool. Sometimes I don't either. And so you can just sit here and you can just look at that movie and I can do my whole treatment and I never even need to know what we're talking about. So it's so freeing in that sense that you can do it without having to share the details because then they're not re-traumatized and then I'm not traumatized by hearing about it either.
There. That because that's the part that can take so long to get
Yes.
through. And you don't need all that. We're going to
Yeah.
deal with, it's almost like we're going to go straight to the facts. We're going to
You
straight to
got
the
it.
pinpoint moments, and
Yep.
where we don't have to relive any of this stuff. That's fantastic.
Oh, it's
Man,
Jason. I had a guy last week. It was so interesting. So I actually worked with him today. He's from Dubai. And he reached out to me and he found me and he's been doing all sorts of stuff for years and years and years. And he said, Laurel, he had some egregious abuse. And he said, there's just this stuck stuff still that I see from my childhood that I just can't get rid of. I've worked through so much, but I'm still so triggered by other people's emotional reactions. And I know it has to do with my childhood stuff. So as we started doing his trauma timeline, which I do in my first session in my intake with people, where I can get a sense of like, okay, if they're willing to talk about it, what we're working on. So he kind of went through some things and then he started to talk about his abuse with his father. And I could tell like this was not going to go in a good way. And I just stopped and I said, you know what? I said, if it's important for you to tell me your story, then I gladly will listen. But if this is too much for you, you don't have to. You just tell me one word and I'll know that that's a scene that we're doing. And he said, thank you. He said, that makes this so much easier. And again,
wow.
at the end of the session, he said, I so appreciate that you didn't make me go through that and talk about that and deal with all those emotions again. Now, they'll see that the day that I work with them. And the worst of it is like literally 4 minutes because you see those moments and you feel all those yucky feels. But then once you see it and we process it, it's done and you never feel it that way again. But so it's a really beautiful therapy in that way.
Wow. This is incredible. I put your website up here, but is
Thank
there,
you.
I know you're on LinkedIn and I know you're on other social platforms. What's the best way for them to reach out to you? Is that through your website?
Totally, yeah. So through my website, then there's a form that they can contact me, and that's how everyone gets in touch with me. I respond pretty quickly with that.
Perfect. Absolutely perfect. This is incredible. I don't want us to go though before you talk about your amazing book because I've heard all about this. We will show it. We showed it at the beginning, guys. We will show it at the end. But above her left shoulder, you could scan that QR code and go straight to pick up a copy of her book. But let's talk about your book and let's talk about what happened. I mean, obviously the title kind of gives away some of the stuff, but let's talk about, why you wrote the book and what you hoped to get out of writing the book and, where you are now in that journey.
Sure. So Betrayed Not Broken was written, gosh, I think like 10, 11 years ago now. And I wrote it actually out of frustration. So I had been working with, I went through the season that all the women coming into me, I had a large majority of them, their husband had cheated on them. And they had gone to their pastors or other counselors to get help. And one of two things happened. They would go, and this is not downing pastors at all, it was just the experience during that time. They were told that they had gained too much weight, they weren't having enough sex, and it was kind of all this blame upon the woman for why their husband had strayed. And so they would then go to another counselor and another counselor. And then the second thing that I found was happening, which is by the time they got to a second or third counselor, the counselor was actually doing marriage counseling and
Oh,
not
wow.
infidelity counseling. Infidelity counseling is very different than marriage
Yeah,
counseling. You can not take somebody who's been betrayed and go, let's talk about how you can communicate better with one another. Let's do communication 101 and how to meet each other's needs when we have this huge, like broken trust and all these other issues. So I would see this time and time and time again that I would be the third therapist in a lineup of therapists, and these people are just bleeding and wanting help and not getting any help. And so I would jump in and do infidelity therapy, and you would see restored marriages, or at least a clean path to decide, do I stay or do I go, without frustrating them in the process. And so I was like, everyone can't come in my office. I'm going to have to write a book because I need to get a tool in the hands of people so that they can do this when they cannot find a good person out there, whether it's a support person, a pastor, or a therapist to help them. So I literally just started writing like crazy and never thought I would be published. And lo and behold, it happened.
that's fantastic. Well, hey, you know what? Now you're out. Now you've got the book out. That is fantastic. And again, people, I will show at the beginning and the end, but it's also on this little barcode that is above her shoulder. So scan that, and you can pick up a copy of her book. This has been absolutely phenomenal. I mean, I can't imagine anybody that's gone through, and a lot of us have gone through trauma in some shape, form, or fashion in our lives. And this is, you're basically giving freedom back to people. So the person that was able to go back in the mall, the person that was able to go down in the laundry room and not have to deal with that emotional trauma every time, the person that's able to look over a ledge, or that's, doesn't feel those feels every time now they see something, that is absolutely incredible. So anything that you want to give to the audience, or I'll post up your I will post this up again. And Lewis, thank you for asking. For some reason the comments are not showing up on LinkedIn, even though I see all your comments from LinkedIn, but mine are not going to LinkedIn right now. So I will post up her website and all of her links. You also can find them if you look in the comments of the show, the actual post of the show. You'll see all of her information there as well. So tell us if there's, I love your parting thoughts. Love for you to tell us anything else that you'd like to share before we close out the show and we let you have the rest of your evening. Thank you for sharing it with us.
Well, sure. One thing I do love to share with people is I tend to not use the word trauma, because we all know what trauma is. There's so many things that happen in our life that impact us emotionally, but we don't consider it a big thing because it doesn't fit under the term trauma. So I always just like to encourage people that if there's anything in your life that you just know you're stuck, this therapy works for that as well. So if it's words spoken over you, or shame, or anything that happened even as a child, the third grade teacher yelling at you, and you just have felt the shame since then, this type of treatment works with not just the big T traumas, but the little T traumas, and gives the same amount of freedom. So that's my parting words, is there's nothing too small, nothing that you can say, oh, that can't be the reason. You would be surprised.
I love that. I almost feel like I want to get 2 seconds more out of you to explain the big T and little T trauma for anybody that misses that, if you don't mind, please.
Yeah. So big T trauma are the traumas that we all know about: rape, murder, whatnot. Little T traumas are things like maybe a divorce or a breakup. So it's how the world categorizes, oh, this is a trauma that we can call trauma, and this is bad, but it's not quite as big as that. So big T and little T traumas. But then I say there's the world underneath, which is just anything that impacts you emotionally, that you can say, this is who I was before this event, and this is who I was after, and I've been forever changed. To me, that means we have all this room in between that we can shift and change, so you can be who you were before that thing happened.
Oh my goodness. What a fantastic show. Thank you so much for being in the house. Let's give it up one more time. Incredible. Thank you for being here on the show. Thank you for being part of our People Community event. Thank you to all our sponsors. Thank you to everybody who showed up tonight. And thank you to everyone who is going to watch this later. Do not forget to pick up a copy of your book. And please check out Laurel and her social media. All of her different social media ways that you can get in touch with her. I'll have that on the post, and we will repost this as well to get anybody who missed it. So thank you very much for being here. Laurel, thank you for being a great sport. This is so amazing. This is so amazing.
Thank you. Oh, thank you. You're a wonderful host. Your audience is so lucky.
You're very kind. All right, guys, we'll catch you later. Thanks for being here.